Hello, S&P here with Cockroach Entertainment, and so with version 1.0 out, I wanted to go ahead and take another look at the design sandbox and work through some basic design mechanics and kind of walk you through how I create a design and how I use my designs in combat. So let's go ahead and open it up. Loading. Step 1, let's go ahead and obsolete all of these. Test dummy, I use that to test supports. We'll get to that later. Alright, so step 1. Create a design. Typically I like to make my support ships first just to kind of get a feel for what I'm doing. I like to make them size 20 to start with. It's really personal preference, nothing magical about that number. And I typically leave it to the default cannon behavior unless I'm trying to design something very specific. Alright, so name. I try to give all of my designs a name, a race, a species name to follow. For this one, I think I will do the Dwarn. I've been playing a lot of Dwarf Fortress lately, and so kind of have the dwarf going, so we'll actually make this the Dwarn Urist. Urist being dagger in Dwarf Fortress Dwarven. Alright, so let's go ahead. Let's explain these basic weapons. Muon, you don't really have access to from the beginning of the game. I'm only going to deal with entry-level techs. The rest will be for other people, other guides, or your own discovery. Alright, so Railgun. Very nice. Sprays bullets. Doesn't say it here, but it has armor pierce, which means it damages multiple layers of armor at a time. Lasers. Very good. Bad against... Ineffective against armor, there we go. Not as good on the big firing arc. Derp versus meh. There we go. And the missile launcher, very expensive to use due to the supply cost, but very good at firing against everything. Also very good at scoring quote-unquote critical hits by punching through armor and hitting critical systems, or even just opening up armor for other weapons to exploit it. So for the dagger, I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to build a lancer. I like using two different weapon systems, so I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and give it two different lasers. One, two, and then the third one. Okay, so one more. There we go. Let's go ahead, and I'll explain why I'm designing it this way in a minute. I'm also just trying to balance out the power of the systems. I think that's a little too far out. Let's actually move that up here, get it a little more forward. Well, now let's keep it backwards. Again, I'll explain in a minute. I'm just trying to get the basic systems up for right now. Alright, so it's built around all of the lasers. 1, 1, 1, 1. Alright, so that's even. Alright, so in combat, you have your... Let's get some armor out. Easier to explain. There we go. You've got your armor. When you're in combat, let's assume this armor hex is your entire ship. No matter where you are, someone is always firing, and they're always going to hit the flat of the hex. So fire can come from this direction and hit you, and so on and so forth. If you're directly from the front, you have two exposed sides. If they're off to the side, you've got three exposed sides, and so on and so forth. What this means is, for this ship, if this ship is in combat, and it is facing whatever it is attacking, stuff is either going to hit here, or for this hex, stuff is either going to hit here or here. And then fire is either going to be vented out or vented in. So you start building fire patterns for how your ship is going to die. And so what we see is, out here on the farthest, which is an extension here, that's the farthest of the front, anything that hits is going to be vented here and here. This creates a death zone of pretty much everything in here is getting hit from both sides, whereas stuff that's out to the side is only getting hit once. because stuff's going to hit the front of the ship and start venting in that direction. So by placing these guns further back, you'll notice by that firing arc, I still can shoot forward. I'm actually extending it a little bit. There we go. I can still cover a fair amount of fire, and I've got most of this up here absorbing the damage. And so for control, well, step one for control, you never want to put a control inside of the kill zone from where you're going to be taking fire. It will die so quickly, and it's just not even worth your time. So let's go ahead and just build some little control bunkers here. Fair amount so it'll have a decent repair rate. Propulsion, let's go ahead and get an engine going on. And we'll wrap the engine around using it as a meat shield as a first layer of defense there. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and shift this back here. There we go. And let's set that as our ship. Got one extra room. Let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so we've currently filled up all our interior space. We have our ship. Most of the damage is going to be vented like this and like that. And so now we need to figure out how we want to defend it. Because armor, it costs money to use and it costs production. And so we want to use as little of it as possible, but enough to still be safe. So if I put this here, I'm guarding stuff from venting through into the gun, and I'm not affecting its firing arc at all. Go ahead and set it like that. There we go. So we can go ahead and put that armor there. We do want a little bit on the front to just absorb basic hits. Most supports, unless you... There's two different strategies you can take with supports to oversimplify things for this video. One is supports that are fairly massive and can take a whole lot of damage and function as mini flagships. Then the other is supports that are smaller and relatively easy to kill. The smaller, easier to kill ones, you don't really want to stack up with armor because their armor will be so weak. I mean, here is health 20, but if I want to go health or size 2, it's health 2. Our size 20 ship, its laser does 14 damage per second that it's on. And so you can have up to 7 things of armor there, and in 1 second I will have burned through it. Minus damage resistance, yeah. But as a general rule, it will burn through quickly. So the smaller your flagships, the less you want to rely on armor. The larger, the more armor you want. And no matter what, you do want to have some basic armor around critical systems, like these control, that if they die, the ship is gone. There's no getting away from that. Alright, so I do think we're going to go ahead and split this into 2 engine segments, and I'll explain why in a second. Let's just rebuild what we have on the other side. And then that gives us 60 space. So armor, it says on here, where does it say it? Armor on the outside of the ship does not use up interior space. The way it detects outside is if it can quote-unquote see the space. See space. And so this armor can see... Okay, armor, this whole thing would count as armor. You can look through... Armor can look through other armor. So here it can look out that way and it can see it this way. It can look out this way and it can see the open space. Here it can't because it's surrounded by subsystems. Here it can't because no matter which way you go, even though there's empty space here, it's still blocked by a subsystem. But if I were to put armor here and here... Oh, I still have that guy. There we go. Armor here and here, it can go out through here. And so this little triangle here is some very good rear protection against shots coming through and just burning straight through the control. And by splitting up the control a little, you've got a little bit more playroom on where stuff is. I'm probably going to even do this using middle click, scroll wheel click to select the system and redesign it. Just go ahead and do that and shift some of this armor to the outside. The further away your systems are from the center. This center line, well, I really wish I need paint on top of this, but anyway, most of the fire is going to be vented through like this. So the further back I can push these controls is going to get them outside a line of fire. And not coincidentally, as a result, the ship will last longer in combat. Now, the way I have it designed currently, I have it facing there, which means you can come straight through there, straight through there. So we want to go ahead and take armor and armor up there. Now that I've got it spread up, I can shift those to single armors. Probably even lose that armor. Because right now we're at speed 3.5, which is right around where I try to keep most of my supports, unless we're dealing with a hyperdrive flagship. The Dwarn, let's just say we're going to build them for gates, because gates just to me sound the most like tunneling in space, so space dwarves. So we'll go ahead and build these guys for gates, so we want to have them reasonably fast. So we'll go ahead and do this, then we'll go ahead and save him. We will combat test him later. He is the cannon. Yeah, we haven't given him any ammo stores, so we can't make him a raider. Lasers are very good for raiders, because often you're dealing with just a couple small ships, not a large fleet. But regardless, we'll just leave him as he is. Go ahead and save that. Then let's create a flagship. So we'll call this the Dwarn Labash. Labash being axe. Axe sounds like a very dwarven flagship name. Alright, so we're going to do a similar thing to what we did we're going to switch it to flagship first. We're going to do a similar thing to what we did in the last ship, except now you'll notice the hex size is smaller, and we've just got a lot more room to play around. And a lot more things to worry about. So we're going to build a light carrier. So what we want to do is we're going to give it a single, fairly large, or maybe two smaller weapons for dealing with punching through armor, because if we were to play with only these two ships, which we wouldn't, but we would want something to punch through armor. Railguns are fairly good at that. So we're going to go ahead and build this around two smaller railguns, and then a massive amount of carrier room. So let's go ahead, on the sides of the ship, we're going to build those, and let's go ahead and get those there. By building on the side, I can still fire forward. I mean, you saw me do it with the other one, but it's back far enough that it's not going to be taking direct fire, so hopefully the gun can fire for longer. Oops. Go ahead and just start dragging this up. There we go. We've got a connecting ship. Now, for this one, I think we're going to go ahead. For my carriers, I like to put the engines up front. Let's go ahead and let's put the engine here. And let's trace this back just so I can see. So, one skip. There it is. Trace it up to here, drag it there, right click to remove, right click to remove. There we go. So the reason for this is that engines typically fall under the less important category. If it's fighting for a reason, and I'm not too inclined to pull it out. I might add a small engine in the back just to have some basic thrust and maneuver, so they can't shoot out my maneuver directly. But of all of the systems we're going to put on the carrier, the engine is the least valuable of them. So let's see, let's go ahead and just get this connected. One more, there we go. Now, ion engines, it does say they have, I do want to point this out, because it says they have a low maintenance cost. The problem is, once you build them and then add whatever power, you don't have antimatter from the beginning, but for whichever of these two power you give, you will end up spending more in maintenance to use them than the rocket engines. which, unless you're building a raider, which needs high maneuver, or possibly a scout that you want high maneuver on so he doesn't end up sitting in one location for a while, there's no real reason for you to use ion until you get antimatter, which is no maintenance cost. Digressing, so let's see, you've got your ship here. We're not really concerned with how much damage these guns do, but I would like to make them a little more than 6 damage per shot apiece. So there we go, we've got them up to 9.5 damage per shot against an equal size. Let's just use plate armor for looking at this. Damage resistance 2.8. Alright, so it'll get above damage resistance. Ablative, does it get above that damage resistance? 6.25, yep. Alright. The 3 armors you have from the beginning: plate, reactive, ablative. Ablative, very good at stopping weak weapons like lasers and supports. Even really good, even better against support lasers. But plate armor, good all around. It says minus heavy, but it is the same weight. If we look at it, it is the same weight. Looking down there at mass at the bottom of the box, it is the same as all of the other armor types that aren't tagged as heavy. Neutronium is extremely heavy, and yeah, there's a big difference there. Most games I actively do not use neutronium unless I need it to guard a key system. But then shields are their own separate bear that you can't get from the beginning, so I'm not going to deal with them here. Well, unless you're devout. Digressing. Alright, so propulsion. We've got that. Most of the fire, we were talking about fire getting vented. Fire is going to vent in through here, so back here is our safe zone. So back there is where we want to start putting things like control. So let's go ahead, and actually one of the things we can do to help with the fire zone is we can narrow this. So let's move both of those into... Is that right? It's not right. It's because it goes back that way. There we go. 3, 3, there we go. Yep. And still vents exactly one in front of there, which won't be armored, so we're fine. We can go ahead and stretch this ship up a little bit to give more room, and what we might end up trimming back how big that is later, but just the size. But it's okay, that means our fire is venting here, so now we have safe zone up here. So we're going to go ahead, take control, build some small control hubs at the side. I always start by making them bigger than I need them, and then I refine them into position. But, I mean, it is nice. The more of them you have, the quicker your ship heals, so there is that. What we'll leave in the absolute crucial center location is the power generator for the railguns. Which, let's go ahead, let's use fission. Well, let's see how big it has to be. Alright, no, we're going back to fusion. Fission is nice because it's better resupply rate, which is really good for... It is really good for carriers, so we're going to go ahead, bite the bullet, and make a bigger power generator. Alright, so now, once we have it built, let's add a couple extra hexes so we can take some damage before we lose our railguns. Then let's take support command and start getting some supports in here. Supplies, get some supplies. Not railgun. Alright, so now we can support 241. That's really nice considering our supports are geared towards size 20. 41,000 supply. Our supports we're using laser, which doesn't use a lot of supply. We'll see once we actually start simulating combat how quickly that runs out and figure out if we want to boost it up a little, because we could boost it up by, actually, let's go ahead and boost it up a little by just knocking out a little bit of the control. What else do we want to do? If we add 2 extra supports, how much is that? 284? Yeah, let's do that. And then let's leave those size 3 apiece. That's a nice size. Let's go ahead and get some basic armor going. I really like using plate. Reactive is also incredibly nice. So for critical systems where, since we were talking about fire coming in on angles, we're going to go ahead and put some reactive there and some reactive here to block things like missiles from punching straight through our armor and going to hit that. And all of this being crucial systems, we're just going to build a small layer. Then we're going to take plate armor and go around it. Once I get to heavy armor designs, I don't like using layering. Mathematically, it's not as good as if, well, let's just say, so I'm building a imaginary 3-plate across here. Nope. That's right, I'm trying to build it straight. Okay, I'm building an imaginary 3-plate on this diagonal. 3, 1, 2, 3. Building something like this is superior due to the fact that it spreads out the damage across multiple armor types. Come here. And once I get the 3rd layer designed, there is no straight way. If you take this and say stack it on the front of your ship there's no straight way to use any one weapon type to punch through. And let's say you're using something that's really good. Let's say you're using missiles. You'll punch through, but you'll get stopped at each of the reactive, giving its control time to repair stuff, whereas here, the missiles will start just ripping up this plate armor. And it'll be like, oh, I'm going to try to repair the plate armor, which is not that effective. This spreads out and gives you a very nice blanket and a very good composite armor design. I digress. Let's get back to designing this ship. 2, it's hard to do a layer on. It's possible, but not a lot of fun. Alright, so because our engines are up here, this is going to be a very vulnerable location. We're going to do the same thing with giving it a decent armor bunker to hide under. Let's go ahead and just get all that. I might even move the railguns one back in now that I see that I don't need them out that far, and take that extra space and fill it up here. Okay, come back 1, 2 as well. Yes, alright, so we can go ahead and build them in there, which is nice because they're not going to get hit by behind, and we've got a very large field of fire on this. There's no one who's going to flank us. Even if they're behind us, we can still get some really good lines of fire on them. Alright, and we do have 2 more interior space. Let's go ahead and extend this up into the engines. Take the engines and extend it back. There we go. Alright, so our current speed is 4.1. That's without adding any armor here. Let's think through this now, because we're going to be venting here and here, which is almost going to ignore these guys. We might want to build a bulkhead though. Alright, so a bulkhead. We were talking about exterior armor earlier. This armor, because it can still see out here, is exterior, but it's got an interior nature in that it's stopping shots from going through these weaker points that are going to be here and here, piercing through to the center. We could go so far as to create a separate armor bubble that is completely contained, but also completely exterior. And this can be very good, and I'll show you a station design I have for one of my devout stations that builds on this principle. It's a little harder to do with ships, because ships you actually kind of care about how fast they go. But let's see how fast we can get this guy to go with the bulkhead. So we need 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's currently going 437, which is not shabby at all, especially for a heavily armored ship like this. So we're going to go ahead. We don't really care about the engines. They're just there to absorb damage. So we're just going to put some basic armor on. I'm willing to have him go down to 3.5. and I'm going to armor him accordingly. Alright, so the more I'm looking at this design, I'm realizing we misplaced these. These guys, any hit coming straight through burns through all of the most critical systems that we have. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this guy and shift him up one. It's going to change how we do armor a little bit. I might even shift this bulkhead up to here with the idea of adding a little bit more of that. And then a little bit of that, and subtract that. There we go. Alright, so now we've lowered him to 358. Can we armor that? Not without extending him. We can armor that, though. And at this point now, his turret is much less of a soft point and much more of a hard point, in that it's got some very decent armor behind it. And if we really wanted to, let's get really creative right now. We're on YouTube, let's get creative. Shift this up a little bit more. And so it's still got very decent, where it's very decent shooting sides, some fields of fire is the word I'm looking for. And if we got one more creative, I'm 1 over. No, I'm 2 over. Okay, go back. Oh, because I just made that armor interior. Never mind. Wrong button. Even worse button. Alright, we're not going to get that creative, because that ends up, I wasn't paying attention to what that was doing to our armor, and it was making our armor interior and less room for pew-pews and engines. Alright, so 2 more space we can use. Don't really need to add more armor to this design. It's a fairly decently built heavy armor design. So I guess we start adding more support. So if we had this guy here, and where can we skimp? Wrong button. Meant to select that and add the engine there. Get us up to 365 and just add a little bit extra armor. Critical systems might get a little more armor now that we're paying attention to it. Alright, so let's see how this guy fares in combat. So let's save. Oh, wow, I just now realized. I'm sorry for those of you who that's been bugging the entire time. I'm not really happy with that cost. Let's see if I show obsolete. Oh, actually, size 100 ship. That's actually not too bad. Let's compare this to the carrier while we're at it. So it's more expensive to build, a little bit cheaper to upkeep, a lot more expensive to build there. Alright, let's actually get this. Still a lot more expensive to build there. His support is 503. Not a lot of armor. They're both designed as carriers. It's an incredibly one-sided fight because neither one of them is designed to do this, but let's go ahead and just spawn them in and see how they do against each other. Alright, you go here. You go here. You actually go here. Let's speed this up to get them close. Alright, and we'll show some of the combat mechanics. Let's actually pause so I can show this. Control P. You, Control P. Bigger. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Ooh, bigger. Alright, that's going to block out combat. Oh well. Sorry if you were really wanting to watch the two ships duke it out. There, we can kind of have it at the bottom while this is going on. Alright, so play. So we see the gun starting to go. Alright, so there's the missiles starting to hit. You've got his missiles coming in, one punched through here. Not sure where another punch through it might have hit some reactive. You can see his front starting to get chewed up by the lasers. Alright, let's slow this down and then speed it up. Alright. The other side, you can see it's starting to get chewed up by railguns. Another missile, looks like it hit the turret. Overall, not horrible. We're losing engine power. Who's supposed to win this? Oh, we're supposed to win it. Okay. Alright, so starting to get torn up. You're seeing now their problem of having no armor in the front. Looks like we're starting to do damage to key systems. Speed it up to full speed. Alright, so here's that wave thing we were talking about. This armor gave out first due to his lasers, and is starting to cascade into a wave. That wave is going to continue this direction. He's not really hitting this side, it's probably because we knocked out that laser. And he's out of power too. And you can see already the command is starting to repair, and there he goes. Alright, so yeah, you can start to see the wave form here of it started to destroy here, and then started a second wave here, but the different armor types made it a little harder for it to punch through. Then the same thing would happen here when you get more ships starting to punch through here. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and clear Sandbox. Spawn two of them in, oops. Wrong ship. Spawn two of them in, not with the idea that it's a fair fight, but with the idea that one of them will kill the other. Pause real quick, I need to get this up. Because here we want to see how they die. And should something be moved, and if something should be moved, where should it be moved to? Alright, so let's go ahead and get it up. They're now turning to face each other. They should be able to actually kill each other. Alright, so there's the wave we were talking about starting to come in on both ships. Neither one has hit physically crucial systems yet. Alright, 5 times speed, looks like it's going to be a race to the finish. Alright, this guy died, so here what we've seen, he's repairing, ignore him. What we've seen is this did not fail, which means we probably want to swap where our control is, or some of our control, with some of the stuff back here. Get a third locus of control, and in doing so it'll increase the repair a little bit. Not that he's, let's get that normal speed. Not that he's repairing slowly, but it could be increased a little more, and by diversifying the control, make it a little hard to kill. Ideally, with most of my ships, control is the very last thing to break. So let's go ahead back into designs. Oh, Sandbox, clear, yes, go away, go away, designs, get rid of that show obsolete, go away. Alright, so let's go ahead and we don't want that, we don't want that. Instead, we're going to put one here and trade out supply. That restricts that. I can put that there. I think that was part of our weakness, is we had extra areas they could punch through. Alright, so we are going to armor up a little more. We're down to 330 though. I don't want to armor up too much. Got 2 extra room. Push that armor out a little bit. There we're up to just under 3.5, so I can live with that. We've adjusted the support some. Alright, so I think that diversifies the ship a lot more. Let's go ahead and see how it handles now, or I'll see how it handles later. We're not going to try to... I keep doing this process over and over again until I get a design I like. I probably spent too much time on it for this video, but it gives you a window into how I design. So now I just want to take a moment and talk about the idea of armor. So armor is great, and one of the things that the game in some aspects encourages is armored bricks. Let's go ahead and into the community and just, well, this might be a good one. Alright, there, you've got a whole bunch of armor. Massive Titan hull, armored brick, bunch of missiles. This is not feasible in combat at all. It doesn't even have enough power to fuel itself, but I digress. This ship, it's a massive armored brick. Speed 0.06. It's going to rely, it's probably got a hyperdrive in here somewhere. Okay, it's got a skip drive. It's got alternative ways to move. But so, there is an advantage to not using armor. So armor, his is entirely exterior, and he just built it all around these incredibly heavily armored missile tubes. But let's go ahead. This is functionally a medium armor design. There is room for designs that don't have armor. So let's go ahead, import design. I've been building my Lige, my devout race. The Berserk is an example of this. So the Berserk is not meant to be scaled up as a support ship. It is meant to consistently live as a smaller support ship. I mean, it might get scaled up above size 20, but it's not meant to be an armored brick ship. You'll even notice it only has 2 armor pieces, which are just blocking critical hits on this thing. Just something punching through, something punching through. By and large, it's not armored. And I want to go ahead and show this. Let's go ahead and spawn allied. Test dummy is what I use for this. Spawn enemy, test dummy. Exact radius is there. Turn off fighting for a sec. Manage supports. Let's go ahead. How many of those can we spawn? 157. Go ahead and get different groups. I understand it's not a perfect combat scenario, but it will prove a point. So obviously, the Berserk it's got more weapons, it's got stronger weapons, it's built more as a support killer. But what we'll see here is that it will win handily and fighting. Starts poking holes. Alright, well, I may end up eating those words. I might have designed the... Okay, I designed the Urist a wee bit too good in that aspect. Alright. But, okay, let's go back in and we'll see exactly how it did. I don't think they're actually able to physically kill this. Yeah. Alright. Clear dead. Clear sandbox. Alright, so I ate those words. It did lose. But, so let's go back in. The Urist you were paying 41k for versus 34k for production, 3 production. Now the Urist is also, it is straight up lasers, ideal for knocking down this design. This design will do better against missiles and railguns where it's not necessarily straight burning damage through the ship. But that said, it's extra price when you are fueling, if you want to fuel massive carrier groups in a swarm, where often something like this railgun, it does 8 damage per hit. Let's look at this guy, his armor. Oh, his armor's health is 20, okay. Well, let's assume he was 1/10 the size, that guy gets scaled up. His armor is down to 10. Still going to hold up to 1 hit. Not much more than that. Your average system health is 2. So the railguns are going to start chewing these guys up. Get them back to size 20. Something without armor realizes it's going to be chewed up regardless of armor. Especially if, let's say, you spawn them at size 2. They're not going to be able to withstand what they're going to be hit with, and so why bother paying for armor when you don't need to? Also, mathematically, if by not having armor on this ship, I was able to give more room to weapons, because in order to maintain its 3.32 flight speed, I only needed this puny little engine. Whereas if I had armored there, here, just put some armor in some decently smart locations, all of a sudden it's 254 and I've got to start extending a massive ship. There we go. So, there are some instances where armor is not the best thing you can do, and so don't necessarily take that as a never use armor ever, but if we go ahead and let's just look at them real quick, most of these don't use tons of armor. I mean, the whole thing I'm experimenting with the Lige has been lack of armor. Now they are devout, they do have a shield, but less armor, less engine, more systems, and you get toward a glass cannon effect of being able to deal out damage really quick, and it works really well with a maneuver warfare. So if you position this with, say, a skip drive that you pick up as an artifact, or a fling system where you're trying to defend, you can jump around and get around enemy ships and take them down incredibly quickly and efficiently. The downside being, if they hit you first, well, I'm sorry, you're just not going to last. But that's my final thought there on armor. Let me just click through these, see if there's anything I didn't explain. Sinews and Verdant are their own separate can of worms when it comes to dealing with ships. So obviously I'm not going to handle them here. The various types of armor that you need to research to get, not going to deal with. Most of those, not going to deal with. But really fun to play with, same with modifiers. So, yeah. I think I've covered just about everything. The community, there is a lot of stuff in here that is completely non-useful, but there is a lot of stuff in here that is. I'd really encourage you, if you haven't, to just page around in here. I have not checked the wiki in a while. I guess maybe it's been kept up to date. One way to check. The wiki is useful. Okay, it has been updated, yes. Okay, so the wiki is also a very useful guide, as long as it's kept up to date, and now that we're out of beta, it's probably going to be kept up to date more and really built upon. So, yeah, that's all we have here, and hope I help you, and go out, build some ships, conquer the galaxy, have fun. Cockroach Entertainment, signing out.